Hi students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I am broadcasting to you live from beautiful Central Europe. I hope everybody is having a great Friday or has had a good Friday and a great week. Hi Hung, good to see you in class. This is a members chat class. Of course, everybody is welcome to watch. There are lots of strategies and a great example of a line graph today for task 1 of the academic version of the IELTS exam. Task 1 for general module is a letter, so it's quite different. We do have lessons for that on our other channel, General IELTS Help. These materials, students, come from our websites with premium materials to help you get those high band scores. Check out aehelp.com, that's academicenglishhelp.com for the academic version of the exam. And for the general version of the test, check us out at gieltshelp.com. That's general IELTShelp.com. Hi, Harminder. Welcome to the class as well. All right, students, these websites, they look like this. This is our academic website with the blue background. You can click that big red button to get your My Student account with 100 hours of video lessons, a fully interactive course for your phone, tablet, PC, and 6 original practice exams to really help you practice and boost your scores. Or for the general version, again, gieltshelp.com, green background, hit that big red button to join there. Okay, again, a reminder, very, very important announcement. Please pay attention, viewers. Hi Firdavs, hi Roshni, hi Parminder, and Preeti. Good to see more members. Very important announcement, no classes from June 16th to the 25th. That's from this Sunday all the way into the following week, Wednesday. I will be away on vacation, same with some of my colleagues. So there's no classes. We do continue classes on June 26th. Okay. If you have questions about the IELTS or our software, of course, we do have people answering emails. You can send me an email, Adrian, A-D-R-I-A-N, at aehelp.com. Okay, so don't be shy. Send us an email if you have questions about the exam or about our products. You can get our practice exams from Amazon. If you search for AE Helps Academic IELTS or GE Helps General IELTS Help. And today, task 1, followed by a reading class where everybody can chat, and then a part 3 speaking class tomorrow to end the week. All right, let's get into today's lesson with this writing task 1. This was sent by one of our members. I'm not sure which one of you sent this to me. It was over a week ago. Maybe it was Preeti or Roshni. I'm not sure. Maybe Harminder. Not sure. But anyway, this is one of the questions submitted by a member for this live class. So let's take a look at it. IELTS writing task 1. You should spend about 20 minutes on this task. The line graph below shows the consumption of several foods per person in Australia between 1939 and 1999. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so this is a classic line graph type question. Let's take a look at the graph. So here we have the graph. Let me make that a little bit smaller so you can see it clearly. There we go. Can you see that okay, members? Begzad, hi. Rahul. Can you see this clearly, this line graph? So we have kilograms per person per year. And then we have seafood, bread, meat, fruit, vegetables. And we have 1939, 1949, 59, 69, 79, 89, 99, and then we have 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, 180. All right. Rahul, you sent me this question. Good for you. Thank you. Members, don't be shy. Always send me questions. Task 1 or Task 2 or speaking. I do schedule them as best as I can. And viewers, this is one of the benefits of being a member of our channel. You get access to our practice exams, and you can submit questions for classes. We appreciate that. All right, cool. So here's the question. Here's the line graph. Our first step is to paraphrase the question with some more details. Okay, so the task 1 in the academic version of the IELTS exam, of course, it starts with the overview. And the overview should be 2 parts. Okay, I know that many of our members now are very clear on this. So it's 2 parts for the overview. First, paraphrase the question with details. And second, describe the most obvious feature of the graph. Okay? And this is about 2 to 3 sentences. All right? That's what needs to be included in the overview. So, let's do that now. Let's look at this overview. Let's do it together. Let's paraphrase this question with some more details. So go ahead, members, on your own, paraphrase this question and give it some more details. Okay? All right. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. Hi, Ava. Good to see you in class. Okay. So I'm going to do the same. Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase the question. I gave you a little bit of head start here. Take a look at the graph again here to help you. Okay, so again, remember this is food consumption in Australia. There it is one more time. Parminder says the line graph, you have to say graph, Parminder. So the line graph depicts changes in the number of utilization of different foods. Okay, number of utilization is strange, Parminder. We're talking about consumption or eating food. So the line graph depicts the changes in the consumption of different food items in Australia from 1939 to 1999. Parminder, that's just more or less a paraphrase. You need more details in there, okay? Rahul says these line graphs. Rahul, this is one line graph, okay? These are multiple lines, but this is one line graph. So Rahul, this line graph depicts the consumption of 5 edibles per person in Australia from 1939 to 1999, okay? All right, Hung says, this line graph depicts the spending of different kinds of foods for individuals in Australia from 1939 to 1999. Bagzad says, this line graph depicts 5 various types of food which were eaten by each person in Australia during the years between 1939 and 1999, shown as decade intervals. Okay, Begzod, you have some more details there. So you notice that these are decades. Okay, the y-axis here is per 20 kilograms, right? None of you have mentioned that it's seafood, bread, meat, and fruit and vegetables. Okay, I would probably break that down as well. So let me show you what I would do here. Okay, and then I'll take a look at some of your sentences. So I would go, this line graph depicts the consumption of seafood, bread, meat, fruit, and vegetables per person in Australia over 6 decades between 1939 and 1999 as 20 kilogram intervals. Okay, so this is my paraphrase here with more detail of the question. So this line graph depicts the consumption, instead of saying different kinds of foods, actually name them, of seafood, bread, meat, fruit, and vegetables per person in Australia over 6 decades, right? That's 60 years here, a little bit of math, between 1939 and 1999 as 20 kilogram intervals, okay? Notice here that these are 20 kilogram intervals. Okay. And to make it more clear, per person per year. All right, so that would be your band 9 start to the overview. All right, that would be your band 9 start to the overview. All right, now we need a second sentence. Okay, so the second sentence should be the most obvious detail. So let me bring that up. Here we go. Okay. And look at these lines. What is the most obvious? So what can we see? What is the most obvious information that we can see in this line graph? Okay, what is the most obvious? I'm just trying a new feature here, so give me a second. Okay. All right. And here we go. All right. The highest intake of food is vegetables. Okay, that's what Roshni says. Begzod says there are many fluctuations. Here, let me bring that back up again. Okay, so here's the graph. Okay, yeah, obviously the highest is vegetables. The lowest is seafood. All right. So, yeah, okay. Definitely the most obvious is that the highest is vegetables. Okay, let's see. What else Yeah, vegetables is very clear. And what's the lowest? So at first glance, you should always kind of see, what can I see at first glance? At first glance, we can see that historically vegetables were always the highest and seafood was always the lowest, right? Those are the two most obvious pieces of information. This one here and this one here. With bread, meat, and fruit, there's definitely some changes going on. We have to go a little bit deeper into the line graph to figure that out. So the most obvious two pieces are seafood and vegetables, right? So let's report on that. Okay, let's report on that. All right, so write your sentence about vegetables and seafood, and I will do the same. Here you don't need to get into specific numbers. Just report on the seafood and the vegetables, okay? So here we go, second sentence. All right. Roshni, good question. So Roshni's saying, which tense should I use for this? Roshni, the tense that you should use for this, if you're referring to the years, is past tense, because this is in the past, right? 1939, 1999, this whole time frame is all in the past. In fact, it's the past century or past millennium, right? So you can use past tense, past perfect. If you're referring to what the graph is showing, then you can use present tense. The graph shows, okay? But the food was consumed in 1939, okay? Hope that's clear. Okay, Begzod says, at first glance, it becomes clear that vegetables were consumed the most, while seafood possessed in the last place over the period. Begzod, seafood possessed in the last place over the period is a little bit strange, okay? So you want to reword that. Seafood was the lowest consumed or least eaten, okay? You need the right verb there. Members, pay attention to what verb you should use for the line graph. Here we're talking about food, we're talking about consumption, so we're talking about eating this food, okay? Using, eating, consuming this food. You need to use those words, okay? Be careful. And eating is very active, so use the active voice in most cases, all right? Okay, so again, the overview, it's two parts. First, paraphrase the question with details. Second, describe the most obvious feature in the graph. So this is what a Band 9 overview looks like. This line graph depicts the consumption of seafood, bread, meat, fruit, and vegetables per person per year in Australia over 6 decades, between 1939 and 1999, as 20-kilogram intervals. At first glance, it is notable that historically, vegetables were the most consumed in all time periods given, as where seafood was the least. Okay? And I don't need to say consumed again because I have it here. So that verb applies. All right? So that is the overview. Okay. So let's see what other students have. Rahul says, at first glance, it is clear that the demand of vegetables out of the 4 edibles was the highest, while seafood consumption was the least throughout this timeline. Good, Rahul. Throughout is one word. Okay, so no space in throughout, Rahul. Throughout is one word. And demand is good. We demand food. It's a need, so that's correct. No, Parminder, you should not give the overview at the end. The overview is your introductory paragraph. Okay, so that should be at the beginning. All right. So now that we've done that, what's the next step? What should we do next? So we have our overview. What do we do next? And hopefully, most of you are thinking, we need to mark our points of comparison. That's right, we analyze it. So when you have a line graph like this, it makes sense to go from the most to the least. So we want to start with vegetables. And then we want to indicate this decrease here, or this fluctuation. Okay, and then this point here, where it ends up 60 years later. Okay. Now, secondly, what should we write about? So we know that our first point is vegetables. We talk about this fluctuation. Okay, that means it's going up and down. It decreases until, let me get this a little bit higher so you can see the years. Okay, so we can talk about this fluctuation here and where it ends up, and then what should we talk about? No, I wouldn't talk about seafood, Bagzod. It's already in our overview, and it's not as interesting for us as fruit, okay? Fruit would be more interesting for us. So second would be fruit, which starts in third place, and then there's a slight variance there, and then from about 1959, it gradually or rapidly begins to increase, and somewhere in the early 60s, it crosses over with meat, okay? So here we can use the word surpasses. Okay, so it surpasses meat, continues to increase until 1999, at which point it's distinctly the second most eaten food in Australia, right? So fruit would be next. Then I would go bread as point number 3. So here, my logic is that the most recent time, 1999, is the more interesting year because it's closer to where we are currently. Okay, and it is the most dramatic change as well, Rahul. That's right. Fruit goes through the most dramatic change in these 60 years. So that's why I would choose it as number 2. Now, some of you might be saying, I would go with meat. So Preeti says I might go with meat for number 2. That's okay. You could go with meat and then explain that it dips in 1969 or stays consistent and becomes less, okay? And then meat, I would describe third. Then bread number 4, okay, that fluctuation there. And then number 5 would be seafood. So I would do it in this order. So number 1, vegetables. Number 2, fruit. Number 3, meat. Number 4, bread. Number 5, seafood. And of course, we have to make comparisons where relevant, okay? So this is our plan. These are our 5 points. Now that we have these 5 points, then we can go on. Begzod is asking, can I explain fruit, bread, and then meat? I don't think I would do bread, Begzod, before I would do meat. Meat is consumed significantly more than bread, and I think it's a much more interesting line. So I think bread is a very clear fourth place here. The only location where you could have a little bit of variance logically is with fruit and meat. So number one, I would definitely go with vegetables because it's clearly the most consumed in all years. Then I could go with either fruit or meat as the second or third point. It's up to you. Then bread, then seafood. It would be awkward to talk about bread after fruit or after vegetables. Okay. So you're saying that you want to talk about bread because they both increase? It's not quite true, Bagzod. Bread doesn't actually increase. The highest point of bread is here. Then it goes back down and then it goes up. This is still a fluctuation. This is not an increase. Bread is a fluctuation. Fruit is an increase. Students, when you're deciding on increase, decrease, or fluctuation, which is it? Okay. You should look always at the start point and the end point. So if you look at the start point 1939 for fruit, it's 80 kilograms. That increases by 1999 to 140 kilograms. Okay? Bread, on the other hand, is not really a big difference because it goes from 40 up to 70, then down to 50, and then up to about 60. So there's not a lot going on there. That's not a true increase in this timeline, Bagzod, and it would be strange to talk about that as an increase. It would be confusing. Does that make sense, members? You don't have enough time in this task 1 to talk about all of the information that's happening in here. Okay? You have to mostly focus on the start points, the end points, and just generally what's happening here, and any key change like fruit surpassing meat. Okay? You can't possibly try to explain all of the movement of all of these lines. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a 400-word essay easily. Okay? You only have 150 words in 20 minutes. So focus on start points and stop points mostly. Okay? All right, Rahul, so that's clear? All right, good. Okay, so then go ahead, members, begin the analysis and write your first sentence for vegetables. Okay? So write that first sentence for vegetables. Okay, I'll leave the graph here so you can take a look at it and focus on what's going on there. Okay, there we go. So there's vegetables. So create that first sentence with vegetables. Okay. All right. So, analysis, create that first sentence. Okay, I'm going to do the same. I gave you a little bit of a head start. So, the analysis is about roughly 6 to 8 sentences. Okay, so analysis, about 6 to 8 sentences, which clearly describe and compare the key points in a structured order from most to least significant. Okay, so diving into the data in more detail. vegetables have the highest demand for Australians beginning at 140 kilograms per person per year. Now don't write kilograms, just shorten that up. Per person per year. Fluctuating throughout the timeline and finishing at 160 kilograms in 1999. All right, so that would be my first point. Diving into the data in more detail, so teaching you a little bit more expressions here to have nice description. Diving into the data in more detail, vegetables have the highest demand for Australians. Let's make that a little bit clearer. Sounds like it's the vegetables demanding Australians. Let's make it clear that it's Australians demanding vegetables. Okay, so again, diving into the data in more detail, Australians have the highest demand for vegetables beginning at 140 kilograms per person per year. Fluctuating throughout the timeline. And finishing at 160 kilograms per individual in 1999. Okay, that's a clear Band 9 sentence there. Begzod says, initially, it is evident that vegetables dominated with 140 kilograms and for the next years experienced fluctuations, ending up with the most consumed food at 160 kilograms. Yeah, that's good. Okay, Begzod, you don't need the word it, but it's okay. Hung says, the vegetables had been fluctuating in consumption. Hung, you need the preposition in before the word consumption. So the vegetables had been fluctuating in consumption between 120 to 140 kilograms per person from 1939 to 1989 and reached the highest of 160 kilograms in 1999. Okay, Hung, that's fine. You don't need to go into that much detail, but it's okay if you give it a little bit of extra like that. That's fine. For Dobbs, describing the graph in more details, vegetables fluctuated over the 6 decades, just the word, no number there, and achieved 160 kilograms per person in 1999. You have a missing piece of information there for Dobbs, in 1999. And the second most consumed was fruit from 1979, which continuously increased. Okay, for Dobbs, you need to be a little bit more careful with that second point. You need to explain that clearly. Fruit, okay, even though vegetables is number 1 because it's the most consumed, fruit needs the most attention because it has the greatest change over this 60-year period. So we start at 80 kilograms and end up at 140 kilograms, nearly double of its start point, surpassing meat at around 1965. So go ahead, members, write the next sentence for fruit. Okay, write the next sentence for fruit. And Rahul, Parminder, Preeti, I promise I will catch your writing for the next one. So focus on writing for fruit. Okay, for fruit, pay attention to the start point. Pay attention to this interesting kind of occurrence here where it's passing meat, and then it's almost the same here. I wonder if any of you will come up with the right kind of description here. And then where it ends up in 1999, okay? So try to focus on that piece, okay? Give you a couple seconds head start. So all right. So now I will do the same. Okay. So I'll write for that second line. Here we go. Fruit experienced the greatest increase over the 6 decades. It was consumed at 80 kilograms per person in 1939. And then gradually increased, competing for second most consumed food between 1965 to 1980. And eventually overtook meat, clearly becoming the second most preferred foodstuff by 1999 at 140 kilograms, almost twice that of 60 years prior. Okay, so let's see what you have for this description. All right, Preeti, let me read yours. So in 1939, vegetables were consumed by each Australian at 140 kilograms annually. Then it fluctuated throughout the period and ended with 160 kilograms per person in the year 1999. Preeti, very close. I just did a couple of small adjustments in the word order to make your sentence clear, but otherwise that was good for the first line. Okay. Rahul says, at closer look, it is evident that vegetables had the highest consumption. You need the highest, Rahul, because it's highest. It's a superlative. It's the most. Consumption, about 140 kilograms in 1939. Rahul, you need a comma after the word consumption there. Then it fluctuated throughout the timeline and finally reached about 160 kilograms in 1999. Good. Parminder says, as can be seen of all the food items, good, vegetables was the most consumed, which showed fluctuation over the given period, starting at 140 kilograms and ending at 160 kilograms per person in 1999. Parminder, some really nice writing. Okay, that's very nice, descriptive, expository writing. Very good. Okay, all right. Begzod says, another striking point, fruit was at 80 kilograms in 1939. After decreasing in the next decade, it not only dramatically rose, but exceeded that of meat by 100 kilograms and over 110 kilograms in 1969 and 1979, respectively. Okay, Begzod, careful. I don't think it exceeded meat by 100 kilograms. It just slightly exceeded meat here and then dipped below it again. So I think you have some information confusion there, Begzod. Careful. However, it does exceed meat by a significant amount in 1999. So by roughly 60 kilograms. Okay, so careful with the way you report that information. All right. Okay, Ferdov says, overall, fruit consumption, not fruits, Ferdov, just fruit. Overall, fruit consumption doubled, nearly doubled, Ferdov's, nearly doubled. It's not quite double. So 80 and 140, it's 20 kilograms difference for doubling, so nearly doubled is better. So one more time, Ferdov's. Overall, fruit consumption nearly doubled over the 6 decades and reached 140 kilograms per person in 1999, attaining 60 kilograms greater consumption than meat at that point. Okay, that would be better for doves. Begzod, which number is correct? So Begzod, you're talking about fruit decreasing here. The problem is, Begzod, that I would not talk about this decrease in fruit. It's not important, okay? This relative increase is much more important here than this little dip, okay? So I wouldn't even focus on that. Notice what I did, okay? So here is my second sentence. Okay, pay attention, members. So stop writing for a second. I know you're thinking hard, and that's great, but just pay attention for a moment. So fruit experienced the greatest increase over the 6 decades. The reason I write that sentence is because that's very important for this line graph, right? So the greatest change is experienced in fruit consumption in Australia per person. So I want to show that right away. Fruit experienced the greatest increase over the 6 decades. Okay? It was consumed at 80 kilo, and then I describe it. So I express that it's the greatest change, and then I describe that change. It was consumed at 80 kilograms per person in 1939, and then gradually increased, competing for the second most consumed food between 1965 and 1980. Now, pay careful attention to what I'm doing here. This word especially, competing for the second most consumed food between 1965 to 1980. When you see this kind of interesting trend in a line graph where you have meat, which is moving like this, and then you have fruit, which surpasses here, it's above, then it dips below, and then it surpasses again. So above, below, above, okay? This kind of change is a kind of competition, okay? When one item and another item are greater and lower, then what you're ending up with, and the way that we describe this, is they're competing for second most consumed, because second to vegetable, of course, right? Vegetable is always first. For second greatest consumed or most consumed. That's definitely a very good way to describe this trend here, using the word competing. Okay, competition. That will be very impressive for the IELTS examiner, right? Does that make sense, members? Is that clear? How we use the word competing for second place in this time period. And of course, I checked the time period, and that was roughly 1965 to 1980. Okay? So if you see that trend, remember the word competing. They're competing. Fruit competes and eventually is victorious. Okay, another way that you will often see that in describing a line graph is it's competing for second place and eventually is victorious around 1980. Okay, all right. For Dobbs, Begzod, Rahul, good. I'm glad that's clear. All right, now describe meat. Okay, students, so number 3 is meat. Describe meat. Okay, so what happens with meat in this 60-year period? So describe this line. Okay. All right, so I've given you a little bit of a head start. Now I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to describe meat, how that works. Okay. Now, of course, I don't need to talk about it competing with fruit again. That would just be silly because I've already described fruit competing with meat in the previous sentence. So there's no logic to talk about that again. Although meat is the second most eaten food item in 1939 at around 110 kilograms. Per Australian. It fluctuates in the coming decades and eventually and finally rests at third place or in third place at $80 kilograms per head in 1999. Okay, so as I'm starting to get into the less interesting lines now, I'm keeping my description or my explanation shorter. Okay, I've explained the two most significant lines, which are vegetables and fruits. And now I'm of course using words of comparison like although. So although meat is the second most eaten food item in 1939 at around 110 kilograms per Australian, comma, because that's my dependent clause, right? My subordinating clause, it fluctuates in the coming decades and finally rests in third place at 80 kilograms per head in 1999. When you have information, students, like per person, ways to paraphrase that are per person, per head, per capita. Okay, so that is my description for line number 3. And I'll check out what some of you have done for that. As well. Okay. Just give me one moment. All right. So Bagzod says, conversely, meat stood at over 100 kilograms and was the second most consumed food per person in 1939. Excellent sentence, Bagzod. It's mistake-free. Very good. In the following years, comma, good. In the following years, Bagzod. In the following years, it declined steadily with some fluctuations and finished at 80 kilograms. Good. Other than missing in the, Bagzod, it's very, very good. Okay. All right, Ferdov said third, comma. So Ferdov, it has to go third, comma. In terms of consumed food, comma. Meat, third, in terms of consumed food, meat was eaten at 80 kilograms per person in 1999. Although it was the second in 1939 at about 105 kilograms per individual. I see what you're trying to do for Dobbs. It's quite tricky. So you're going from present or from closer in time to the past. It's possible to do that, but you have to be very careful with your grammar and your comma use so that it's clear for your reader. Okay? All right. Now, let's say that I'm running out of time, which I am for this class, but let's say that I'm running out of time in the 20 minutes. So I already have quite a few words between my overview and between the analysis. I probably already have about 120 words or so. So I don't need to write a lot for the last two, which are bread and meat. Okay? I'm going to keep it fairly simple. I'm going to write as little as possible while still describing bread and seafood. So try to do the same, members. Try to write one or two more sentences for bread and meat, or sorry, bread and seafood. So one or two more sentences for bread and seafood. Keep them quite simple, okay? Make sure that you report them, but that you don't go over the 20 minutes. Don't take time from task 2. Okay, I'm going to do the same while you do that. Okay, so again, keep this in mind. Bread, 40 kilograms in 1939, roughly 60 in 1999, and seafood is 20 and remains 20. Okay, keep that in mind and keep it simple. Keep it simple. Okay. Okay, so that is the way I would finish this. So here we go. Finally, bread and seafood were the fourth and fifth most eaten food in Australia per person in these years, respectively. So that means that bread was fourth and seafood was fifth. Bread began at 40 kilograms per year and finished at 60, as where seafood remained more or less a constant 20 kilograms per person per year. Members, take note of this expression here, as where seafood remained more or less a constant 20 kilograms per person per year. Okay? Why? Because it kind of does. So we see a little bit of movement here, but it almost consistently just stays along that line. Okay? So not overcomplicating this information. All right, members, so that is my full essay. Okay? So again, here we go. Let's read this essay together. This line graph depicts the consumption of seafood, bread, meat, fruit, and vegetables per person per year in Australia over 6 decades between 1939 and 1999 as 20 kilogram intervals. At first glance, it is notable that historically vegetables were the most consumed in all time periods given, as where seafood was the least. Then the body paragraph, the analysis, diving into the data in more detail. Australians have the highest demand for vegetables, beginning at 140 kilograms per person per year, fluctuating throughout the given timeline and finishing at 160 kilograms per individual in 1999. Fruit experienced the greatest increase over the 6 decades. It was consumed at 80 kilograms per person in 1939 and then gradually increased, competing for second most consumed food between 1965 to 1980 and eventually overtook meat, clearly becoming the second most preferred foodstuff by 1999 at 140 kilograms, almost twice that of the 60 years prior. Although meat is the second most eaten food item in 1939 at around 110 kilograms per Australian, it fluctuates in the coming decades and finally rests in third place at 80 kilograms per head. Finally, bread and seafood were the fourth and fifth most eaten food in Australia per person in these years, respectively. Bread began at 40 kilograms per year and finished at 60, as where seafood remained more or less constant, 20 kilograms per person per year. Now, if you want to challenge members, I challenge you to write a simple summary for this line graph. Okay, here it is again. This is what it looks like. It's quite a bit of information today. I know it was a little bit of a fast-moving class. I was also trying out a new technology here in the live stream, but thank you for bearing with me. I can absolutely tell you, Preeti, Begzad, Rahul, Parminder, that your task 1 writing is quite good. For Dobbs, same thing. Watch your grammar. Okay, make sure that you keep reviewing for grammar. Take these sentences, put them into a piece of software like Grammarly, see what it tells you, where you should make some corrections or send it to our editors. Okay, coming up next will be a reading class, so reading strategy with an example. And if you have questions, send me an email, adrian@aehelp.com. Join us on our websites, aehelp.com for academic and gieltshelp.com for general. That's it for this class, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully I will see you soon in the next class for reading. Much love to all of you. Bye for now. And again, remember that between the 16th and 26th, we will not have classes. Bye for now, everyone. Have a great rest of today, and hopefully see you in 30 minutes for some reading.